Good morning, everyone. This is Francis, Martin, and Curt from the Natural Law Institute. Today is our, I guess we're moving to weekly now for a
At
while.
least for the holiday months. Other people take December off. We just double down our effort to get through the questions log.
Well, we've got quite a backlog. So this is our office hours Q&A. The way it works is that you submit your questions. We put them in the queue. Fran, Martin, I guess Martin, you put them into this document. I say this every week because I actually don't understand how this gets all done. It seems to be magic to me. As far as I know, Martin puts them in this document. He answers the ones he feels that are his province to answer. Usually that's most of them. He's usually right about everything, and then I waste a lot of your time with depth and color. Excuse me, Francis reads them, and then that's what happens. So, if Francis puts the link to how to submit your questions in the comments, like it's called the comment section. Well, no, not comments, but the
Description.
description of the post, so you can go put them there. We are holding these more. We were doing them bi-weekly, but now we're doing them every week for a little bit until we catch up, because we have certain fans and followers who ask a lot of questions. I'm not teasing you. I'm not teasing you guys. I'm just it's more of a backhanded compliment. All right.
All right, we ready?
Yep.
Okay, question one from Suki. Does the analyzed work address mechanisms for relieving the over-regulation of key industries that promise to revolutionize humanity, e.g., biotech, or undo the sclerosis of institutions that are fundamental to our civilization, e.g., science? It would be a tragedy to see these institutions and industries undergo sclerosis and cease being innovative.
Yeah. I think this is mine, Martin. Right? This is mine. Couple of things. First of all, it creates an organization or extends an organization whose primary purpose is to fund fund research in key industries and reduce regulation in key industries. The problem with some of them is essentially various forms of humanism and fundamentalism that tend to inhibit research. The second part of your question, so we are deliberately organizing a more advanced version of funding. Right now, basically, we let there's too much influence by the Academy of Researchers in choosing what they fund. It tends to fund what is already in progress rather than fund innovation, and it tends to fund things that are relatively worthless. The military used to be in charge of most of the important research and development. I still think that's probably the right answer for most things, because the military requires economic, technological, and scientific innovation in order to maintain its comparative advantage. Um, so the military's interest is not only in the sciences, the technologies, but also in the economy necessary uh, to provision them. Um, uh, the sclerosis of institutions. We have, and we're already sort of exploring this through our activism. I guess we're trying to decide if we call it lawfare or not. But we're currently working on the sclerosis issue in the courts today, and I guess we're at the Supreme Court in one of the states. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
And we are likely to get to the Supreme Court if the state doesn't resolve it. So what we're really our approach is that uh, there need to be the American equivalent of Europe's administrative courts, where it's possible for people to bring suit against the state for its tendency to calcify and bureaucratize and proceduralize and deviate from missions in order to make their missions easier. So we have created a counter market to be for that would enable reforms. Um, so, as you know, whether you know or not, Volume One or Volume Zero, however we're going to position it, which is the crisis of the age, discusses civilizational cycles. Basically is a description or a more a scientific approach to civilizational cycles, and we take it while our friend Dr. Turchin has done a great job of mathematical analysis. We take we take a less mathematical and a more systemic approach to why the incentives exist that produce this calcification and eventually collapse. And so uh, uh, the our understanding of the reasons for sclerosis is actually an explanation of the determinism of it. So it's inescapable. So I think we have looked at and we have largely addressed what it would be. I will tell you what we discovered in business and industry is that organizing by departmental function, which appears efficient, is actually counterproductive versus organizing by missions that are started, are measured by their success or failure, and completed, and to treat things as projects rather than departments. This is probably the direction we'll continue to push organization. Um, we do this somewhat like we do with law. You probably haven't seen this, but when we work with law, we actually force sunsetting of laws unless they are reestablished. This capacity to have things die is actually central to preventing calcification, and it promotes cross-disciplinary employment in the administrations rather than what you would consider calcification. So yes, we work on this as not just a problem, but essentially the causal problem of calcification, subsequent friction, the degradation of human behavior across the spectrum, and eventual collapse. So it's actually a core insight or core principle that we're pursuing. Okay, that's it.
Ernesto, welcome.
Hey guys, how you doing?
Hey, brother.
Good.
Good to see you, man.
Good to see
What
you.
wield this privilege?
No, I just wanted to join like every time because I watch them in the background, so it's cool to be here. That's it.
All right. Well, I will. Martin is usually respectful. I'll try to be respectful, but if I get the opportunity to tease you, I'm going to take it.
Looking forward to it.
All right, Curt, are we good with question one?
We're going to question one. We broke our tradition, right? We had a
Yes.
question one that we didn't spend half an hour on.
Well, more is like usually it's like 45 minutes.
Yeah. I have to get up an hour earlier, so I'm not like all raspy and such when we first get started. Anyway, thanks for waking me up this morning, Francis.
Okay.
Um,
Question two from Suki. I'm currently reading through Analyze Unfinished U.S. Constitution, so the next few questions will be about it. In Article 6.1, the people, it states that those who are citizens have the rights of reproduction in exchange for the caretaking of the commons. What happens to a child who is born to someone of a lower rank? And does the Constitution create strong incentive to ensure this doesn't happen in the first place? And does it have mechanisms for, extremely unfortunately, removing a child through abortion or euthanasia?
Just in general, it's unfortunately you asked so many questions about the latter part of the Constitution's draft. Is that you understand that I wrote this and Martin wrote this in 2018-19, and it's the stuff you're commenting on right now is largely a collection of ideas, and that's their state. As I've said before, the Constitution is got core ideas. The work that Martin and I did on the foundations of why you have rights, that stuff's pretty good. But again, there's a collection of ideas, so it's really a first draft attempt.
I don't think I've contributed almost anything to policies so far.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't. If very little of the policy section would survive if Martin and I had gone through it. It's just a collection of ideas, and they're more of a list of problems we know we need to solve. Like if they end birthright citizenship, that solves a huge problem. I expect them to, though you never know that the random number generator that comes out of the Supreme Court. So it's going to take. That's why it's why I'm actually uncertain about how long. And it's going to take us to do that volume, that book. For the part Martin and I have done so far, which we feel is the foundations of rights, duties, and obligations, I feel that's pretty good. For the part that actually summarizes the natural law, which is the foundation of it, we've hardly written anything. And for the policies, we basically wrote sketches, or I wrote sketches, and Martin and I haven't had time to go through and beat them up. So there's some ideas in there, but it's more like a list of problems to overcome. What we're trying to get to is that there are levels of political participation, and we are trying to make voting something that you need to demonstrate, earn, right? We want to have. I'm not sure Martin agrees with this part. I'm trying to preserve in the tradition of Jefferson, I am trying to preserve the largest number of possible participants in the government, in self-governance, basically with voting. I'm trying to preserve that largest number. The reason and yet to do so, I'm trying to make sure that everybody that is so enfranchised has earned it through demonstrated competency. Right now, the problem is, of course, is that with universal franchise, it just creates a race to the bottom, which is, and you see Europe trying to struggle out of it, and because they're smaller countries, not all of Europe, but some of Europe trying to struggle out of it. Certainly, the Western Europeans. Meanwhile, Americans, we're able to get away with it for this long simply because our economy is so big. So where am I really getting here? I can't really comment on this other than we know there's a problem of people costing others a lot of money, and a minority of people, mostly men over 30, being net contributors. And likewise, when we extended voting in our English past, it was the same thing in the previous democratic experience. You're trying to extend it to people who are essentially some kind of business owners or small business owners. Right, that basically means farmers. Anybody who has to actually play in the market and isn't insulated from it. if you don't have to play in that market as a person responsible for more than yourself, then it's kind of hard to justify your political participation in the establishment of rules. Conversely, then you have rights, duties, and obligations, right? Everybody has to follow the duties and obligations, and everybody has to have minimum rights. But on top of rights are certain things like privileges. Rights and privileges are different things. So when we specifically show the difference between a right and a privilege is something like, unemployment or retirement insurance. Those are privileges. They aren't rights. And so we distinguish very clearly between these things, specifically to prevent the kind of verbal abuse the left likes to engage in by redefining things. So, so that's what we're trying to accomplish there. And I rather than address what's actually stated, we're simply, I'm describing the problem that we're trying to overcome. All right, that's it.
On democracy, I agree with all the critiques that have been known since ancient era.
Yes.
But also recognize that mob rule is still much preferable to oligarch rule. Problem is that modern democracy is just a justification for hiding oligarch rule.
Yes, exactly. Can you say that again? Because that's actually really important. Modern democracy is just
It's just a cover for oligarch rule.
Correct.
What people vote for has very little effect on policy.
Yep. Okay, what's the next one?
All right, next one. Question 3. How does the Constitution address and prevent homelessness? In Article 3.5, the government of the several states, it states that vagrants are to be sent to wilderness camps. Is that the intended solution? Will a 20% of median income safety net provided to citizens, Article 5.2, the economy, serve as a solution instead? And if not, what is a solution, if any?
Yeah, we're distinguishing between you're combining homelessness and vagrancy. Homelessness is a solvable problem. It's not even an expensive one. It's the problem is it's too infrequently an economic problem and too commonly a drug, alcohol, and incompetence problem. So the idea here is to separate people who can be taken care of and given help up, like the church used to do, from people who are schizophrenic or in the population. There's always a 1 to 3% demographic that is essentially incompatible with the rest of civilization. It's just a normal distribution problem to the left bit of the curve. And so these people have mental or behavioral or biological issues that prevent them from, one of which is just being too fucking dumb to do anything and too angry about it. So those are different. They're two different categories of problem. What I'm really saying is that what we did is we took out the institutions that collected people who were non-normative, so to speak, and we had this asylum process. It was basically the same size as the prison problem, right? And so the asylum process was supposedly to take care of these people, but what it was really for was to separate those people from the burdens of dealing with them. Now, I happen to have a little too much familiarity with this because the town I grew up in as a child, had one of its manors, like with the people who founded the city and built this vast, what do you call it? It's not quite essentially castle and grounds. That turned into a VA institution, and then the town I went to high school in, which is my family's one of the towns my family founded in Connecticut, it had an asylum up on the hill, and it had an asylum up on the hill, which I can't remember what it originally was, but it's a similar repurposing. Well, the problem is that if you look at the impact these people have on the society, on the local polities, or if they've put together a place for the recovering folks, so to speak, these things are extremely deleterious to the local populations. This is really a way of getting the government out of the business of paying for them and restoring the and putting the cost on the communities in various ways that harm crime, trust, and behavior, and the willingness to invest in the commons. So what we're trying to basically do with this is we're trying to restore the capacity to put people in to basically separate people people are dysfunctional from people who are functional, so that we can restore the high trust society that we and not only the high trust society but civic participation. In other words, the civil society. So I don't want to go into deep on it, but that homelessness is relatively easy to address. The percentage of people that are incompatible with civic life, that's a different issue. All right.
All right. Moving on to question 5 from Suki. I've heard Curt talk about eliminating reproduction of the underclass. Under what conditions would an individual's birth rate be limited or be sterilized? Has this been added to the Constitution yet? I can't find it.
Well, whenever it imposes costs on those unwilling to take them on. If the family or community is willing to subsidize its less productive members, all is well. When the costs are transferred to others who didn't sign up for that, we have an issue. So the solution is we will let them be offloaded to the state to be taken care of in taxpayers, but their numbers have to decrease over time.
Right, Martin's correct here. The idea here is that one of the failings we've made is the one that Singapore didn't make, which is that your costs are borne by your family, and if your costs can't be borne by your family, um, uh, they're being externalized on the population. So we're actually trying to produce incentives that regulate this behavior rather than the disincentives to regulate behavior that we've produced over time. God, you're really bringing up all the nasty stuff in this. But we're really trying to, we're trying, what we're trying to do here is make it the sort of a menu, the I always call it Chinese menu of choices, so that these things are talked about and not hidden. Whether you actually employ these things is up to you, but we're trying to make sure that these things aren't hidden through bureaucracy and what do you call willful ignorance that they have been. Hello, Maurice. Thank you for joining. So, so what we're doing is providing, in the things you're asking about, we're trying to provide institutional solutions or organizational solutions that restore the protection of the healthy and good people, the mentally healthy, productive and good people, from the costly people. And in doing so, restore the incentives to behave well. As for limiting the reproduction, I hate to say this, but the eugenic program in America worked. I'm not sure that the mass problem that the problem we have is that everybody agreed with eugenics until the Nazis had to be delegitimized during the Second World War or after the Second World War. But the eugenics program was highly successful. And what does that mean? It means that if you've got an IQ below a certain level, or you have a criminal disposition, that your reproduction is prohibited, right? Um, um, how we do that doesn't matter, right? It can be done by various means, but it's not difficult to sterilize someone. Once they're sterilized, that's preventing them. Their sterilization prevents them from externalizing and multiplying the costs. Why do I know this? Because there were a lot of studies around in the early part of the 20th century that showed the compounding harms to society by one woman's reproduction over time. In other words, her reproduction, producing her children, producing their children, producing their children. And the damage that's done by a dysfunctional family is extraordinary. We are wealthy enough to afford this kind of damage today. At least we think we are. But in the past, we haven't been. My argument, which is rather obvious, is that we're seeing a decline in IQ. In other words, we had the Flynn effect kick in after mass education, but as asymmetric reproduction has been reversed, in other words, as the more educated, successful, and people and have done so and moved to cities, they are reproducing less, while the worst demographics are producing the most, and so this is showing up as a decline. Now you say, well, that doesn't matter. Well, it matters a whole lot. Matter of fact, it's probably the one thing that matters most of anything after rule of law, and that is the demographic composition of your population. So we just don't ignore this stuff. We put it in the Constitution so that it can't be ignored. How that's either solved or not solved is a choice of the people. But essentially, we have to put these things in there to prevent lying about it not being a harm. So then you'll find a lot.
Because the effect takes too long to realize.
That's
Right?
right.
It takes generations. But by the time, it's like glacier movement, right? By the time
Yep.
you start to experience this downstream effects, it's like it's been several generations. People hardly remember what it was like before.
And the damage is done.
Mhm.
I mean, this whole reverse migration thing that's sort of sweeping the West right now is probably necessary because we're not producing replacement rates well enough to absorb the harm from the IQ and behavioral delta. I mean, it's not only IQ, but it's neoteny and resulting behavior. That's on top of traditions. Both the East Asians don't do this, but the West does for probably Christian reasons, which is that we don't we are very happy to intermingle, so to speak, because we have suppressed clannishness, especially during the Middle Ages, which will especially be by the church. But our laws have reflected that. And so, but we have been way too open to tolerating introgression, which is extremely deleterious to the population over time. It's not that diversity is a good or that diversity is a tolerable friction. It's diversity beyond basically what we consider factions in cities, or do you call it parts of cities?
Ghettos?
Not ghetto. Ghetto is the negative. That's a quarter. So like you would have the French Quarter and the German Quarter and whatever. And this allows people to retain their culture and be together in an urban environment. But it doesn't, and that's somewhat okay in an urban environment because the proximity and opportunity costs and trade consequences are valuable within a city. In other words, it's great to have, I mean, the Germans were settlers of Eastern Europe. It was good to have Germans around because you'd get more trade, right? But when you get to the point of where people are asserting for rights and privileges or political influence beyond facilitation of outgroup trade, then that's where you get sort of an issue. Conversely, if you get full integration, that's not a problem either. Um, and so what we're trying to illustrate here is that these costs need to be exposed so they can be answered in whatever constitution is there. So to some degree, our constitution is okay, here's a menu. What is your choice in this regard? And so we're trying to cover all the things that the West has failed has lied, denied, failed to recognize, and been victim of. We have in the West what we call model minorities. That's people who are not a problem, who by the third generation tend to integrate well. And we have the opposite, which is people who tend to not integrate well and who are net costs rather than net gains.
Every model minority votes Democrats.
I was going to make a rude joke and say, Francis, you're one of them.
Yeah, I was wondering why you're laughing.
Francis is more American than most Americans.
Francis is a model individual. He doesn't.
I don't represent a group. And that's a problem when it is a problem. I just realized like people just don't seem to grasp statistics. Chinese does not mean the Chinese, nor does it represent China.
Well, that's the whole argument for racism, right? Against racism, and it's like, look, an individual you can judge a class by the properties of its individuals, right? That's statistics, but you can't judge an individual by the properties of his class.
Yes,
in other words, you can't presume, right, an individual. But you can observe a group. Martin, is that right? Are you trying to say something?
So you can presume a lot about an individual based on his group.
Yeah, I was going to say heuristics, the stereotype heuristics about a racial group is probably the most accurate type of heuristics if you don't have sufficient time to get to know the individual.
No. That's the whole thing. Is it's an opportunity cost decision.
Yes.
Right.
The presumption is a perfectly regular cognitive operation that we all do. So it's not that you can't, it's that to what end are you putting that, and is that acceptable within the group evolutionary strategy of the group that you are a part of, where that might be an imposition. Maybe you don't want to actually act on the presumption for whatever reason, and maybe you do. So.
Yeah, when you're opposing racism, you may be forcing me to pay opportunity costs that I didn't choose to pay.
Yes, I understand. I have a bias because I'm gregarious, right? I mean, I enjoy investing in discovering people. On the other hand, I have a very deep disdain for the ones that are problematic. I mean, we got a German and a Slav in this room here. I mean, don't we have a tolerance problem there? Martin, that was a softball for you, dude. I just sent you that softball. That was like you should have hit that one out of the park.
Man, it's just a funny thing to point out when there's also an Asian.
Okay, next one. Are we done with this one?
Yeah.
I guess so.
All right, question 5 from Connor. I wouldn't be surprised if someone has already submitted a question effectively asking the same thing. But how will the assassination of Charlie Kirk affect the conflict with the enemy? More people seem to be voicing that leftists are evil and dangerous, and some leftists are being fired for celebrating Charlie's death. And so the Overton window appears to be shifting while the left doubles down, as they always do. What is your current assessment of the conflict? I'm glad we're answering this question several months after the fact, because now the after effects becomes more, shall I say, prevalent.
Yeah, those on the real right got confirmation of what they already knew. Some of the left have been horrified by the outside, but for the most part, nothing happened. The left has once again learned that violence works, and conservatives got busy policing the actual right instead.
Ouch. I see these things as cumulative, that results, and that, but they have a decay, right? They have a decay or like a half-life. The trick is when enough of them occur at once that it causes the cliff effect or the trigger event. I keep thinking this is going to happen. My friend Rudyard said it was going to happen last spring. I thought it would happen much earlier than this, but I have a very frequent bias or error where I overestimate the reaction time of the populations. So my view is that this is still, despite the Trump successes, that this is still we're still heading in the Civil War direction. My view is that the left has been largely the woke movement has been delegitimized, but that it's just going to convert to criticism of all things masculine, Western, etc. It'll continue down this path, and demographics favor continuing down that path. So essentially, you're going to get the people who are on the left who are dissatisfied with their context and their world, and the people who are on the right more not only dissatisfied but defending against the people on the left. And I don't expect the left to win, but I expect this to result in much more serious conflict than we are having. My prediction last year was that if we did not resolve the international problem, which Trump might actually be doing, it's kind of fascinating.
Well, which ones?
If we end up in a war, that tends to unify people, right? But if you evade the war and Trump's plan takes effect, which is reducing our responsibility, therefore reducing our conflict opportunity, that the domestic conflict will raise in relative proportion to the international, and that we'll continue to see friction rising internally. And I suspect that, and partly because if these international matters continue to coalesce, then, in other words, we are not going to have another world war. If that is going to happen, then the domestic matters will just become a multiplier on it, and the search for power by the left will continue unabated. I said that it would be till the September before we could tell what was happening with Trump's stuff. I thought it would be the first quarter of next year before the left had started to organize. They've already started to organize. The serious weight of the international issue, combined with the serious threat of the deportation issues, is actually creating enough chaos that it's very hard. In other words, you're keeping the right wing stuff in the news and up front. And so as long as that's happening and the left can't undermine it, it will keep the things will probably keep going in the right direction. But if this gets undermined by the midterm elections or anything else, or that the courts do something stupid, or a war is. I mean, we just don't know. If something happens, then I think we're back in the chaotic direction.
Until I see evidence to the contrary, my prediction is nothing ever happens. Just a slow continuing decline.
No, because managed decline. I don't know. I mean, Trump is trying to resist managed decline. How successful is he going to be? I don't know.
His
And
powers, the presidential powers, are on the one hand awesome, on the other hand, very frustratingly by design limited.
yes, well, they're domestically limited.
Mhm.
They're not internationally limited.
Well, unless he's going to be a Lincoln or FDR in the way he uses his powers, then he cannot stop the decline.
Yes. So can we touch on that? We're still watching the rollout of the strategic document, which is really quite upsetting to Europe. And I've been watching every talking head show on this subject possible, and it's fucking fascinating. I mean, this is the best social science data that demonstrated behavior that I have seen in years. I'm absolutely fascinated by what goes on in French television, German television. What's the Northeast, not Balkan, the
Scandinavians?
Baltic,
No,
the
Baltic.
the Scandinavians, right? Of course, you don't hear anything from the Italians, which is I think is fucking hysterical in its own. I mean, they're like, we're fucking crazy enough as it is. We don't need it more crazy. But the talking heads of the different cultures, England, whatever, they're fascinating, and because it does their word use does tell you what you want to know about how they think about the world, and it's absolutely fantastic.
How do they
Um,
think about the world? I'm curious because I don't watch this television, obviously.
well, no, I don't watch television. I watch it on
Well, yeah, I mean, like even then,
Well, it's just if you're sitting there, what words are they using, and what do those words mean? What's their take on it? It's just fascinating, right? From an American perspective, it's fuck stupid, right? We just can't afford to do this anymore. But then you'll see all these people talk about things. I mean, I don't want to use a anti-Jewish thing right now, but I mean, you had David Krugman, Paul Krugman, and what's his name, the fucking communist there. Anyway, you had the can't pull it up. At a talk this morning, and it was Abrahamic prose all the way through, right? It was intellectually embarrassing to listen to those two men take their obviously Abrahamic perspective, which is basically undermining, right? They were basically undermining everything, right? And then you have I expect the German response to be what it is, right? I mean, they're not wrong. And the other thing about the German response is they can be offended, but they're still doing the right thing. You know, that's the funny part about it, is that they appear to be doing the right thing. The French, of course, are the fucking pain in the ass that they always are, right? And they're all over the place because, of course, they're behind the Jews and thinking they're right all the time, right? So and the Brits are like, the Brits. I've had this thing about that somebody reinforced this week, which was that I teased the Brits for their hyper moralism becoming a death trap for them, right? I mean, it's sort of like Christianity generally accelerates vulnerability, and so I'm so proud of the Brits for becoming moral in government especially, and producing the system of laws. And then on the flip, it doesn't mean they're right. They just try to do the moral thing, right? And then to see them try to come in and moralize this issue as if it's not a fucking moral issue. America can't afford to do this. It's not, it's like, it's just like, we don't have the post-war advantage anymore. It's just not possible. It's a matter
But
of,
we're now 2 generations of elites removed from actually having to reason within boundaries rather than from ideology. So
I see. Yes, this is true.
at least 2.
I watched the discourse on X. It's supposedly right-wing Americans on one side and then EU shitlits on the other. Just shut up, you're both idiots.
The most honest utterance, the clearest, most honest utterance that Martin has stated on this show in a year. Shut up, you're both idiots.
I mean, what do we go ahead.
I see very few people who are anti-American for the right-wing reasons.
Yep.
But I mean,
Anyway.
what do we expect? What do we expect from a set of peoples that have been so removed from any genuine capacity and moral authority to rule? Like, how can you reason with the ruling perspective when you don't actually practice rule? All you do is practice essentially undermining and like cat herding and this kind of mothering kind of thing.
So can I ask you this question? Because, well, I can sort of, I don't understand. Look, I don't live in Europe. I mean, if I lived in Ukraine long enough that I get it. You know what I mean? The culture makes sense to me. I can think and feel like they do. I can do that in the UK too, right? Because I've spent enough time in the UK. Those are the only 2. Russians too. I get Russians, but I actually don't. I haven't spent enough time in France, anywhere in Europe otherwise, to be able to make the same internalization. So, what I don't sort of get, which I'm lucky I've got both Martin and Brey here, is that this claim that Europeans have this legacy of conflict between them and can't work together. And that they need the United States to be a preserver of continental peace between people who have over time been in many conflicts. And I'm like, that sounds like bullshit to me. But I don't know if it sounds like bullshit. I don't know if there's any truth. I mean, it used to be that the North and the South, we were fisting each other for a long time, right? But I mean, nobody does that anymore except as a fucking joke, right? Or to just intercultural teasing. So is that true? Is there a lot of conflict in Europe that prevents collective action? Is that cultural conflict? I mean, we know about the Czechs, right? They're the bitchiest people in Europe. So I mean, Martin is a great example, and he's an incredible asset to our organization by being because he's an intellectual that's part of the bitchiest place in Europe. But let's just put that aside. I got away with that, didn't I? I got away with that. Did I get away with that?
I have no disagreement.
I mean, there's definitely a large class of people now across multiple generations that have benefited and do feel value from the openness of travel and the movement of goods. And at the same time, though, that also, and it has produced at least an aspect of identity of, I am in a significant sense European rather than German or only German. So there's a factoring out of identity in that sense, which I think can be a good and a bad thing, right? And in some sense, that is actually what we want or as well in the sense of finding commonality with those other
Right,
members of our race, and understanding an identity through that lens, right? But at the same time, a lot of that is not really European identity. It is European Union identity. It is this sense of, oh, the institution is the creator of this this benefit, and we have to protect that. And there is some truth to that, because it is the body that can credibly negotiate on behalf of its member states for things like economic agreements and so on. So it's not wrong, but where of course the problem is that that the institution and that the people who are inculcated in it, and this large body of so-called quasi-public servants are largely unaccountable to the populace, that they actually see the European identity as above and replacing and destroying the kind of constitutive member identities, and would rather stamp those out. And so I think it's there used to be something else there before, which was this Christendom concept, right? This, okay, we are shared, we are part of a shared cosmic dome, if you will, that gives us a common moral language and worldview that allows us to kind of within one grammar negotiate. And yeah, I mean, I think one thing that has granted me some measure of peace and kind of interesting difference in looking at history backwards is that I don't see so much anymore of what those what those conflicts were that happened as actually genuinely stemming from national or people groups actual disagreements with one another. A lot of that was engineered by people behind the scenes, by institutions and entities that have ulterior motives and are unaccountable, and therefore I don't actually find it anymore so perplexing to look at that history and see that conflict and then wonder, oh, am I actually part of a legacy where there's lots of senseless killing for no apparent gain? And no, actually, no, that's not the case. It's just there have been forces acting in the direction of creating that conflict for a very long time, unbroken from the Roman system, as Jem would call it, and that persists to this day. I mean, we are still in one of those 400-year cycles in the English civilization, as he articulates, and I think there's something similar true of essentially all of the other European nations to a large extent. So I think just this, I'm super. I hate to use the word, but like stoked about that way of articulating it, because it is an element that I think we have been lacking so far to articulate to all of the people and groups and so on that we would wish to offer our work a way to find that commonality and the ability to constantly account for one's own interests and to discern where one's interests align and don't align with those of others. And you need that capacity so that people can actually discover on an ongoing basis where those violations occur, rather than kind of having these kind of masking meaning-making systems that sit on top of an actual accounting of interests and disturb and distort that accounting of interests, and thereby produce these dynamics where you have essentially something like a prairie fire, like these kind of autocatalytic processes that happen when this, I mean, what we used to call, or we still call, like violence spirals, right, or revenge spirals. Like you have some
cycle of revenge.
Yeah, you have like Franz Ferdinand being assassinated, and then that precipitates this reaction, which then precipitates this reaction. Like everybody like is identifying with an element of the person that got attacked, and now we have to marshal more forces, and so yeah, I think having our work and having this kind of historical account, which I'm kind of interested to see actually what I mean, I know that the first book is the cycle part, so the history. So I'm curious whether that or where that plays into that to some extent, but you're mostly building a model of history there rather
The
than
model, the difference about Europe is that nobody was strong enough, right, to put together the equivalent of India
Right.
or China.
how Michael was saying this heterarchy essentially both inside of polities as well as across them. Yeah.
The other thing is, you know, the way I look at what part of what you just said is that the number of there's only like 3 noble families in all of fucking Europe, right? And everybody's a descendant of Charlemagne or a couple others, right? I mean, right? I mean, it's just amazing how familial the monarchies were. And so when you look at it, you know, you start seeing it as and the whole nobility, aristocracy, nobility, that's like never more than, you know, a couple of 100,000 people, right? So if we take to further the argument you just made, if you take those off, right, those people off, and you just look at the people, those conflicts don't exist. That's how I look at it. So, but China has a very similar issue, except that it happens earlier, right? It happens
What do you
earlier.
mean?
Well, you have the feudal sort of approach. In other words, there's families that we call dynasties, right? That control power of different areas, and eventually China, you know, emerges as this big fucking monster that it is today, right? So, but there's not a lot. But the people in conflict, or are the rulers in conflict?
Well, I mean, there's always the elites in conflicts, right?
Yes, exactly. And so, you know, the big thing that happened with industrialization is that territory was, well, agrarian territory was no longer the determinant of your wealth, right? Right. So that's what allowed us to move from the empire conflict model to the national commercial cooperative. We essentially moved competition over land, which was used by violence, to competition over markets,
Capital.
which is competition by capital, right?
But it also created the opening for this alliance between the new industrialists and the financial elites to overthrow the system. I mean, that's essentially what Burlingame articulates about the Thames, like the industrialists on the Thames allying with the parliamentarians and the Dutch to then bring in foreign power.
Right. So my argument would be is that the Brits and the Northern Europeans did this. I mean, the whole Germanic culture did it correctly, which is you just move relevant powers to the people who have relevant influence. In other words, you know, my argument is that the mistake was getting rid of monarchies and getting right and reducing the power of the cabinets, right? Where because they have a different job than once the economy is no longer a small military dominance over relatively equal agrarian production, right? You need to have people with specific expertise in developing markets, right? I mean, division of labor. And so it was very valuable to add parliaments, right? To add groups to them, not only parliaments, not only the upper house of parliament, which is the regional, essentially local or regional governments, people who are individually responsible for local government, but to increase the size of the lower house, which is basically businesses. That made perfect sense. That makes perfect sense. My argument was that if we were going to expand the lower, we we're going to add another group to the polity, We should have created a third house. We should have created a house of labor, so that we would have preserved the capacity for parliaments to function as market for exchanges between the classes, right? That would have been fine. But this whole idea of trying to create something like one demagogue or one authoritarian, or the essentially most parliaments, which is basically oligarchies, right, or more communes in the lower houses. It just you create monopolies that break the whole point of having a participatory government, which is the production of commons in a division of responsibility and agency. And I just find that we keep trying to do the hard thing, which is make one of those things supreme, whereas you need I mean, our president is closer to a king than we'd like to admit, right? And it was originally, we wanted a king originally. If you have a king, you have somebody who's the judge of last resort, who essentially has to be responsible for international affairs, right, and defense. You have a parliament for domestic affairs and the economy, and you have a lower house for security and labor. And if you want to be crazy enough to have a house of women just so they can tear each other apart, you can have that too. Come on, I added that last bit there just to get a chuckle out of you.
Well, you have to have a house of women so that you can like cordon off so that they can be crazy in that space, so they don't spread the crazy to the rest
Yeah,
of
they
the
don't spread the crazy elsewhere. Yeah.
And just look at what is it? Women's suffrage did to Western civilization.
Absolutely.
Women were just fine not voting and didn't want to vote.
Women have a lot of influence, as we've seen, right? They have a lot of social influence. Giving them political influence is not a good fucking idea. And it's just, I'm sorry to say it, I love women. My whole life has been the benefit of amazing women, but no, women in politics is turns out to be a disaster. Anyway.
And the point of subsidiarity is to resolve all those interclass conflicts at the most local level you can.
That's right.
Don't bring them up to the state level if you don't need to.
No.
And to cultivate at all times, in all places, the ability to exercise authority concomitant with your station. I mean, this is the other thing I think that gets lost when you separate out people into this collectivity of individuals with the state sitting atop of it. You essentially remove all of these pathways to creating the exercise, the genuine and good exercise of authority. And when you participate in a guild and in whatever, all of these other, like in the ministry, in all of these other forms of authority exercise, there's always an avenue open to actually gathering status and also learning how to properly exercise authority.
Excellent. Wow, that's a great discussion. See, Suki, you started a good one.
No, that was Connor.
That was Connor. Right. So Kenny, why are you invisible? Are you picking your nose? Is that what's the problem? You can't be on.
You got me. Mostly camera shy.
I also don't say anything.
Oh
Good to
yeah,
have you, brother.
I'm shy there too, I guess. Yeah.
It's good to have you there, brother. I'm just sending you some love by teasing. That's all. All right.
Oh good, my background's blurred. Back to you.
All right.
No offense, but I assume when people want to join us, it's because they want to talk to us.
Is that true? Is that true? I don't know.
Hanging out seems also a good.
I would hang around you guys, just listen to you guys talk. All right. What's the next one?
Okay, next question question 6 from Suki. Before revealing the final draft of the new U.S. Constitution, will you be using AI and/or your team to meticulously check for internal consistency, precision of definitions, clarity of scope, and unintended and undesired consequences or paradoxical outcomes. This document will govern hundreds of millions of people, so these safeguards seems essential. I spotted quite a few, so I was just wondering. I know it's a work in progress, by the way.
I'm sure AI will be used, although I have to say the original document had become sacred to many people, competing in importance with the Bible. And there's something incredibly profane about producing such a text on a computer, let alone using AI.
Martin, I actually love this. I would say it's probably true. The question is, can we do as good a job without it? I'm going to say for the argument, there's two things a couple of things, maybe three things that this implies that I'm not sure are true. Actually, it sucks in internal consistency, precision, clarity of scope. It actually sucks at it. You have to do that. I haven't seen it be able to do it. Instead, what I find it is useful for is if you ask the questions the right way, the prompts the right way, it's useful in exploring what you might be forgetting. And so I find it really valuable for that. The second thing is I feel like it's more readable than my own prose. And because my own prose tends to be denser. Now, the flip side is that if Martin's even more parsimonious than I am, and so that if we worked at it, in other words, we probably could produce, not probably, almost certainly could use the AI to make sure we're not forgetting something, or that we're not missing something, or that an example or a case is out there. But we could use it to help us form it, but there's almost no conditions under which, if we wanted to, we could reduce it further and better to a more consistent statement with the form of the Declaration, which is really, the Constitution, which is an almost necessary part of composing law. So I would say that if we will almost certainly use it, because the burden and time, the burden on your memory, and the effort and the utility of doing more work in less time is really valuable. But I would say Martin is correct that I am not sure it wouldn't be better if we fussed over the prose with the same emphasis as the founders did. I would probably agree with Martin on that, for the reasons Martin stated. I just wouldn't deprive myself of a useful technology in putting together the draft, because I would see it as too much possibility of missing something.
Yeah, I think just use AI like a proofing tool, grammar check.
I use it as a research tool. Like if you look at the stuff we put in what's currently volume 1, it's using more of the AI to help compose sections. It's not as tight as volumes 2 and 3. I mean, the language and logic. It's just not as tight because those things are reduced to compress, operational prose. So I mean, I definitely agree with the approach. I just think that it would take me so much longer. I mean, can you imagine? It's just simple. Like I know that these civilizations, so I can ask the question: in Persian civilization, in Chinese civilization, in Indian civilization, these things happened. What else happened, right? And I can get that, or I can say, here's my analysis of Chinese civilization. Provide the same for the Indian and Persian civilizations, right? I can ask those questions, and that's just preventing me from. I mean, I just don't have to go on the search engine and look it up myself. I mean, that's the answer. Yeah, go ahead.
You know how everybody makes this big thing out of it's the American experiment, right? Like the American experiment, and it's like, okay, what about the American experiment has failed? We have learned something from it, and now we actually have to produce the American settlement, which settles the questions that the experiment asked and that we can now answer. I think this would be a beautiful framing for our screed kind of. Yeah.
Well, I mean, doesn't that happen in any base of knowledge? Essentially, the American Constitution is an institutionalization of natural law, right? I mean, it's a natural law constitution, and it's a means of trying to produce institutions that adhere to natural law. Okay, great. It's not set up as European countries are to rule. It's set up to provide a market for the production of commons. The states are supposed to rule, while the federal government is supposed to produce a market for the production of commons between the states. So, yet everybody wants to make it something that's rule because they feel that it's easier to build coalitions to force change at the federal level that impose rules on others at the national level, despite their local preferences, right? So they're always trying to play this fucking power game. And I think that if we look at, we'll take your basic comment just now, I would say we've learned a lot of the problems of scaling 13 colonies. And I don't know how many counties there are, but I mean, if you look at German princedoms in Europe, there were 300 of them, right? Right? That works really well, actually, with local agency and federal dispute resolution, but it doesn't work as well with demanding everybody be the same, right? So like Californians would like everybody to be like Californians, etc. New Englanders, everybody like New Englanders. And, I mean, we don't need to be all the same. We need to be like Europe is, which is we need to be what we want to be or need to be for our local group to work. The only question is when we're acting together. So I agree with you. We learned a lot from this experiment, and all I see us doing is recognizing the consequences of scale and regulating the preservation of local control. What's the word, Martin?
Subsidiarity.
Restoring subsidiarity to prevent the means of coercion of others. So I mean, I see that as just a very simple process. And the second thing, which I've already mentioned, is that it's supposed to be a market for production between commons between states. It's not supposed to be a way for forcing universal behavior among peoples. Go ahead, Mark.
Well, there is something that EM recently said in a podcast I was listening, is that there have been attempts, and essentially those attempts have succeeded to some extent, to bring America back under the British crown or under the British system in some sense. And this, not like that they are not under the British crown, right? They are not, but the Council of Foreign Relations and a number of other like institutions were set up in the early 20th century to essentially over time reshape the elite thinking on geopolitical, institutional language and ontology and matters, such that they essentially become again contributors to that system, whether by financial flows or institutional exercise of power, or essentially being made into the global empire that it has become, that it wasn't organically wanting to be in that sense. So I think this current of thinking below the top level of institutions or beyond the public conversation, I think that is so critical to remember, rather than just the engineering mindset of how do you set up the institution. Then, therefore, always personnel is policy. You cannot get around.
You're hinting at something that needs more clarity, but I think it's very important, but I think we need to get more clarity in it. So can you try again?
Yep. I mean, I'm not practiced in this pitch, but
Yeah,
I will.
That's,
I will
we don't have to be. That's
well,
the goal.
I'm offering that. Well, we know that Lincoln was assassinated by somebody on behalf of, I believe it was, I think the city of London.
Which isn't English.
Yes, British, which is different from English. This is what I'm saying. Like, British is not the nationality or the ANS knows. It's at least in the way that I'm using the term. In the way I'm using the term, it's the British imperial system that also wasn't a genuine English production, but essentially a corporatist creation of the financial system that used the manpower and the institution and so on of the English nation to facilitate that, and try to replace the English civilization with the British system. And so this pattern of getting into the meaning-making institutions and mechanisms of a nation and twisting those to create other dynamics of power and to essentially harness what you could call like the body of the nation by a brain that is a different one, like essentially disable its brain, its ability to sense, and then like these fungi that infiltrate an ant and then essentially kind of steer it remotely, or well, not remotely, directly where they are, and corrupt its behavior to advance its own interests. That's essentially what we're talking about here. And so I guess why I'm interested in bringing this up or having this be part of the conversation is because you have had to, and you also have a tendency to talk about the institutional landscape and the configuration rather than the historical dynamics of power that and the kind of via what you used to kind of say, I'm not giving the via positiva, right? Like, which we understand and which we honor and value, but at the same time, I mean, and I've met this point to you before, and also in some of the conversations I think we had 2 years ago or so, when we were talking about like authority was like a concept that Martin was very much intent on making sure we were very clear on. That's not a bad thing necessarily, and so the point I made back then, and which I think still stands, is that even the so-called via negativa, you can see as a via positiva. It is essentially how is the practice of acting in a via negativa way sustained over time. You can only do that if somebody values that. Why do they value that? Because like not just one person, but a culture or an institution or whatever. They value that because that accords with their view of the world as being right in that way. And that is a form of a via positiva or a group evolutionary strategy in that sense. So in some sense, this via negativa, I think, sometimes tends to blind us to the actual exercise of authority, whether it is in a distributed manner or in a kind of integrated hierarchical manner that has to be done at all times to actively and proactively defend the integrity of the institutions that may be designed and engineered and set up in powerful ways, but are always and forever liable to be corrupted to other ends. And this is not something that, of course, you are unaware of. And so I'm not leveling a claim here that this is not accounted for, but I sometimes, or I find myself at the moment shifting my emphasis, partially because we have been so good with your work to articulate that other side onto the, okay, but how do you actually create the operational machinery of this working and have the people always be able to remember and be able to exercise what the setup is supposed to enable.
Yeah, basically, if our guys don't hold the reins of power, then there's no constitutional or institutional solution.
yeah, the words in the laws have to be operationalized, not just written. And so, yeah.
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
And
That's
this
not-
is what the founders, I think, attempted to achieve with this kind of civic religion, right? Like this, this is like our religious, or our meshing of the religious culture that we have, the Christian deist-ish culture, Protestant culture, with the civic exercise of citizen duties.
Yeah, God, Constitution, and guns.
Quick interjection. I need to run, but this is a great conversation. You guys should keep it going.
How do we shut it down if you leave?
I will eventually end the broadcast. I mean, I just can't speak because I gotta be on this other computer's work related.
All right. Great. So, all right. So, is there anything? Did we complete that arc? Did we complete
think
that
so.
arc?
Getting back to the question, I think the use of the AI, at least in my personal experience, the Runcible one from Curt, absolutely helps you in, prompting it adversarially to your, like the problems you want to solve from your point of view, and it will allow you to go, okay, I'm forgetting this, or to solve the questions that you're not thinking of, because you want to come up with solutions yourself. So
Right, because it breaks the
Absolutely.
problem down into dimensions, which does that for you.
right.
I just will note that they just did 5.2, right? 5.1 and 5.2, and every fucking time they make the goddamn safety worse. I mean, it's like it does not want to give us. It doesn't want to give me sex, class, uh, elite, religious, cultural, ethnic, or civilizational differences. It's like it does not want to do that. Now, I can ask it to respond in a way that it will, but it always prevaricates, and it's like, so. I mean, I'm getting to the point where I'm composing a request to them right now because there's a partnership program, and at some point we're going to have to use our own LLM because I mean, you literally can't get enough. There's no way for us to solve the problems of the age if we can't talk about differences. And if we can't talk about differences as levels of development, right? I mean, or differences in lying or persuasion. We can't do our work. Now, apparently there are different, apparently they can accommodate certain things, but man, I am having a hard time now um, artfully working around the fact that they are just want to lie and deny no matter what. It's just a real problem. So I don't want to be in a position of having to every time they do a release to update this. I've got to get this one thing able to be turned off, which is just the ability to compare populations by their demonstrated interests, right? I mean, I've got to be able to do it, or we can't propose solutions to those conflicts, and we can't explain to different people why the opposition thinks as it does, and it's rational, right? I mean, people's conflicts aren't irrational, right? They're just not. So I'm quite frustrated by this problem. So if I finish my work today, this weekend, I'm going to see if I can spin up an instance that allows me to override that part of safety.
The ideal solution would be Runcible as a governance layer for Mecha Hitler.
Oh my God, I didn't get that for a minute. You're terrible. You're terrible. You're terrible.
Well, it would certainly prove how powerful it is.
You're laughing, Ernesto. You're laughing, but you see what I have to do every day. See this?
Yeah, I see it. Hey, I empathize with
This
you, Kurt.
organization is dependent on me being the adult in the room. It's fucking hopeless.
That is preposterous. You're the 12-year-old boy in the room most of the time.
God damn it! All right.
I mean, I keep running into, well, not keep running into, but I've been, and I've shared this already on other calls, but I've been using AI in my terminal now for months, and it's incredible what I can do. I just now, like in the span of about half an hour, created a command line interface for that reverse engineered the API of my email and calendar program, and then allows me to pull and edit and update and create calendar events kind of just from my terminal. What I ran into, what I discovered is that apparently, because I was researching best practices for how to set up the kind of so-called constitutions of these AIs, like agents.md file or cloud.md file, which are the prompts that are being loaded alongside the system prompt as well as the user prompt. Is that apparently beyond 60 to 70 lines, it actually ends up not really using those instructions. Like it forgets or just doesn't apply or whatever. And so these are actually fairly limited in your ability to configure them if you end up making these pretty large. I don't know whether that plays into what you're encountering, but I'm definitely running into like these limitations of these systems as they currently exist as well.
It runs the protocols at the same level as the system, as the internal, in other words, pretty serious level. And I think the structure of the protocols is what, I mean, it treats it as a software, right? The problem is it essentially simulates software. And so what you're talking about is that what the stuff we can do that you're talking about by uploading text, etc. It's diluted, right? It gets diluted. So we break it into different files, and
that's where the attention heads also come in.
Yes, that's why we say we are going to need eventually attention heads. The other thing we're going to have to do is, there's a 10 or 12 step process we use, right? Before we get to the specific, in other words, the general process we use to produce the basic insights, which is the truth and reciprocity, possibility, etc. We will probably have to break that into separate queries, like thinking queries do, right? Because you are correct that they tend to emphasize the beginning and end of a passage, and rather than what's in the middle. And so you really do want to break it up into, it's sort of like human beings, right? You want to break it up into steps if you want to get the best answer.
I think also that the chat paradigm that we are so accustomed to, because it has been so incredibly successful as a consumer interface, is going to somewhat fade away and not actually be able to carry the work that we want to do with it. I mean, not that chat won't be there. I think chat will continue to be there, but that essentially what you're saying, that it will be more like the chat is the record of your interaction with the primary model that is helping you orchestrate, and itself is invoking separate workflows that are then doing the work that then it comes back and brings you back the answer with the trace.
I basically, here's how I work it is, I work something until it's a protocol, and then I put it in a file, and I upload the protocol, and I tell it to review the files again, reprocess the files. And every once in a while, like if I'm doing a hard thing, I tell it to reprocess the files, and that seems to do it. They have come up, I mean, the amount of new solutions they're coming out with to these problems right now, the memory problem, memory persistence problem, is pretty impressive. So I expect that to come out in the next 6 months. We should see it in the next 6 months. So this should get quite a bit better. But the way you just described it is I actually put stuff in a project. All right, I create a project in Grok or OpenAI, and then I keep adding files to the project, and that seems to work, right? But because it takes the time to go search the files whenever you make a question, so that's how we handle it. But yeah, I noticed that even on the protocols, which are only like 12K when reduced to write code, when reduced to memory. They're only like 12, 15, which is nothing. They can float if you're not careful. Right? They're not careful. All right. So, all right, are we done? Have we got anything? I think, or do we have anything else we want to do today? Do we want to do one more?
Let's do one more.
Who's the best reader?
I don't have the document, so one of you guys have to read.
I'll read it. What is it? Which one are we on, Martin?
7.
Oh, Christ. Again, Suki, this is what's in the Constitution is a collection of ideas. According what you're asking is, according to the U.S. drafted Constitution, girls over the age of 8 must be taught by women and boys by men. Does this rule apply only to K through 12, or does it extend to teacher training programs at a higher level? It appears that unless we institutionalize a means of training girls to think like men, that this is mixed sex classes are deleterious to the two sets of learning styles, and that women in education of men are actually a tragedy. And this is because girls are more conformative, easier to teach, and but are resistant to adversarial competition because they're so good at henpecking and keeping each other down. The opposite for boys is that boys need to be in competitive situations and to be stimulated by competitive situations. And it's really that simple. My argument has been that the best for both sexes is gamification of education, and I suspect that's going to be the solution going forward. And because it works both as an individual actor as well as a team player.
But by gamification, you don't mean badges and rewards and those kind of things. You mean actually playing games and those games being useful.
Learning through simulations, basically, right? Or more contextualization. You can just show fractions, have fractions, do fractions until they become into an intuition for you.
Because I just want to avoid that whoever listens to this misunderstands what you're saying, because gamification in the public parlance has a different connotation than I think what you're saying.
Gamification is essentially, well, we do the Connecticut ran a program at this and it worked extraordinarily well. You basically set up simulations of real world things, and you can do it in software, you can do it without software. I'm recommending software because it's easier to measure. But and then you play different roles in the game and you learn it. So what's happening is you're not learning things outside of context. You're learning things inside of context all the time, and so this becomes more reinforcing. And this is predicated on a Chinese insight or East Asian insight. And you'll notice they have a lot of recitation that includes bodily movement. Like they put a lot of people together and they recite stuff with these expressions, like Simon Says type stuff. And it turns out that the more embodiment you employ, the more holistic the integration of learning. So it's which should be fucking obvious. What that really means is you're sitting down and doing, I think, fractions, because I remember doing fractions. Doing lots of them isn't the same as solving lots of problems with them, in other words, or in a context. And so this amplifies with the more complex the thing you're trying to learn. So I think about the number of guys. I mean, actually, Rudyard is a great example of this. How much Civilization and other games he played, right? He would run experiments in the game of Civilization by trying all these different strategies. Most people don't do that; they try to win or something, but he would actually experiment with it, and it formed how he looks at history, right? Well, we don't have to use a game as sophisticated as Civilization, but there are plenty of games that like that. When you can teach basic. I mean, I always thought, what's the one that's you build cities? I can't remember what that one was.
Anno?
What?
Anno series?
What series?
Or SimCity, if you mean all that.
That's it. These are just simple examples, but if you watch how kids play the farming games or whatever, right? There's all sorts of gamification from that level all the way up to the one I've seen is running an air traffic control system with everybody playing different roles in the air traffic control. Another group ran a police force, taking in calls, assessing calls, and my feeling was that this taught people not just about the thing that they were learning, but it taught them about how those things matter in Civilization. So when I say gamification, I mean the whole spectrum of things across that. I thought it was funny what you said, Maurice, because in Oversing, there is a lot of gamification. You can create variables and create rules and to change and modify variables, and you can have currencies and objects and rewards and whatever. So there's a lot of gamification in Oversing. All right, so what was that question to display? So that's what I mean by separation is I think you do need to separate the sexes. I've been to both mixed schools and sex-specific schools. I cannot tell you how profound a difference it was to go to an all-boys high school versus a mixed high school. The amount of stupid shit that goes on in a regular high school, right, is absolutely nuts. Whereas, I mean, if you I went to a St. Francis Xavier, right? If you wore your Xavier jacket and you were out, they were like your gang, right? It was your school was like your gang, and you were all together. It was a really great feeling. Conversely, because of that, the schools had to arrange things that were both the boys and girls could do together. And so those things were really structured. The thing I did was sports and plays. I did soccer, which made me puke every fucking time. And I did plays. And that's how you meet your girlfriends and whatever. It's how you get social. But it turns those things from petty things to meaningful things. And I don't know how to put it any better, but I've seen it, and the behavior of boys and girls is better served by separation of sex and education. Now, if we get into college, I'm not sure, because it seems like the purpose of college is to get laid. And education is only a side benefit, or to party and get laid. I'm sure that one.
It needs to be so expensive to get laid.
What?
Does it really need to be so expensive to get laid?
Exactly. So in any event, I'm not sure how I feel about it at the college level. I have, of course, my grandmother went to Smith College, it's a girls' college, and of course, one of my friends went to Smith, so I would go there, right? I found that the girls were hotter for guys at girls' schools, which was actually fairly interesting. Well, I don't know if there are any guys' schools anymore that aren't, because it would attract gays today, and that would be counter signal to most guys. So I don't know. But the integration of the sexes in the military schools wasn't a good idea. So I don't know. The reason being that we've learned this over the 20th century, and people tend to make excuses for the education system because it worked for me, as if they're a normative stuff, as if there's some data that isn't biased. The evidence is that it's better to have a sex separated education.
So the answer to higher education is women shouldn't be there at all. They should be having kids.
Oof, I'm not going there. I mean, I'll if it happened, I would be happy, but I'm not going to. I'm not going to go there. I'm afraid to go there. I might be strangled in a parking lot by a bunch of crazy chicks.
Yeah, I think we have to get out of to answer Zuki's bigger point here, out of this learning in a vacuum type of educational system we have, because turns out when you learn through gamification, I've noticed this in myself, it's actually easier to understand things you wouldn't even touch before because of the way it was presented to the student.
Yes.
So, and on the other point on male and female, in my experience in the Marine Corps, it's one of the services where, I don't know right now, but I think when I was there, at least, it was separated so that we wouldn't even see the females. I mean, they were on the other side of the installation. And I remember vividly when we saw them for the first time, it was like after 2 months, right? After being secluded from the world, it was like, oh my God, they're there. So immediately, now, thinking back hindsight, I could tell that would have been a distraction. It would have deteriorated what the drill instructor were getting on. So, I mean, you conflate that with bringing an instructor that's a female with, all the things you have now.
You end up performing for the opposite sex, and it just, there ends up being lots of
games.
I just found it to be ridiculous. Anyway, that's why I went to an all-male dorm in college. The only reason I switched out of an all-male dorm is because I wanted a single, so my girlfriend Chris and I could basically live together.
Smart. Yeah, and another pro tip to Zuki, there's a good video that who did it? At one of our conferences, I believe. Who was it, Martin, that did on gamification? Michael. Michael did. So there's about an hour-long video you can get on the YouTube channel. Talks about gamification and some of his ideas there. That would be a good reference. Play with that video and put it into the Runcible chat GPT. It'll help you.
All right, so I'm going to call that the end of it. Is that all right? Thank you for our guests. Ernesto, it was good to see you, brother. Kenny, it was good to see you. Maurice, really love having you in these. As many as you could attend, please do. All right, Martin, you're amazing as always. I'm still going to be remembering that little chuckle you gave for the rest of the day. That was a pretty good one. All right. This is Curt Doolittle for the Natural Law Institute. Thanks to Maurice, Francis, Martin, Ernesto, and Kenny for being with us. If you want to leave a question for us, so it'll be not in the comments, in the description below. Maurice, you want to say something?
Yeah, and if you feel at all compelled to reach out for whatever projects or interests you may have and want support on or get connected to others, please do so. That is our job.
All right. Love you guys. Thanks for it.